Hello, Eliot Elementary School students. Our musician of the month is Johann Sebastian Bach, or JS Bach for short. Before we learn about his music, I want you to see where JS Bach fits into the timeline of all the other musicians we've learned about this year. We'll have to go backwards in time, starting with 2020. And we're going to show each musician and where they fit. Every time you hear this noise, we're going to go back 3 years. How long ago did Bach live? Well, we'll start going back from now. First we come to Dave Miller, who was born in 1959. That's not too long ago. And not too far before that was Bobby McFerrin in 1950 and Joni Mitchell in 1943. The oldest Beatle was born in 1940, and Ray Charles was 10 years before that. And then way back 129 years ago, the oldest member of the Carter family, A.P. Carter, was born in 1891. If we go back 121 more years, or 250 years from now, it takes a while, but we get to Ludvig Von Beethoven, born in 1770. Sometimes Beethoven's considered to be the most important classical composer ever. Beethoven knew about J.S. Bach. But who was J.S. Bach? Where does he fit into the timeline? We have to go back 335 years from today to reach Bach. So when you zoom way out, you can see that most of the musicians we were learning about were relatively recent in history, except for Beethoven. And Bach is even further back in history. It's like really traveling back in time to learn about J.S. Bach. A very different time. Bach was born into a musical family on the other side of the ocean in Europe, in Eisenach, Germany. He was the youngest of 8 brothers. His father and his grandfather were musicians, and all of his uncles were also musicians. Both Bach's parents died when he was a teenager, and so he went to live with his older brother. Eventually, he got work as a musician, and he married, and keeping the family tradition, he raised 7 children with his first wife, Maria Barbara, and 13 children with Anna Magdalena, his second wife. You can do the math. That's a lot of children. Not only was Bach hard at work having children, he was an incredibly hard worker at writing music and performing music. He composed more than 1,128 works. If you listened to Bach for an hour every school day, you wouldn't finish listening to all his music even by the end of the whole school year. When Bach was young, he learned to play the violin. He was very good, and he used to make up melodies as he went along, or improvise. He was composing music on the spot. Bach wrote many beautiful melodies, as well as some very challenging music. Bach was also very good at writing and playing keyboard music. He played something called the harpsichord. It looks like a piano, but inside it's different. When you press the key, a little pick plucks a string inside like a guitar. J.S. Bach's favorite instrument to play was not the harpsichord or the violin. What is the loudest, most earth-shaking instrument you can think of? Today you might say an electric guitar, an enormous drum set. Maybe your parents would say it was a 3rd grader practicing recorder. Well, during Bach's lifetime, there was no question which instrument was the loudest, most earth-shaking instrument. That instrument was the organ. One of Bach's jobs was as an organist for a church. Bach was a master at juggling melodies. His music often has many melodies happening at the same time. Watch this organist play Bach. Each hand is playing a different melody, and his feet too. Bach was fond of writing something called a fugue. A fugue is a bit like a long round. The first and second and third graders have sung rounds like, "Are you sleeping? Are you sleeping, brother John? Are you sleeping, brother John? Morning bells are John. Morning bells are ringing. Morning bells are ringing." Well, a fugue is like a round, but longer. Listen to Bach's Little Fugue in G minor. See if you can tell when the melody starts over. Bach was so good with patterns, he composed something called his crab canon. The melody can be played backwards and upside down at the same time. Bach even included hidden messages in some of his music. He spelled his name using musical pitches. Now you might already know that musical pitches only go up to G and then start over, like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And she keeps going over and over. There's no H. So how did Bach find an H to spell his name? Well, in Germany, the note B is called H, and the black key, or the B flat, is called B. So he was able to spell his name. Bach wrote music for orchestras and all kinds of instruments. His most important job may have been writing music for church. Every Sunday, he had to write for the orchestra, voices, and choir. It was called a cantata, and it was like writing a very long chapter book every week. Talk about hard working. When Bach died, music was changing, and Bach and his music was not celebrated like it is today. But famous musicians like Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven all learned to play Bach's music, and it was an important part of their education. It wasn't until 2 years after Beethoven died in 1829 people started to celebrate Bach's music more. Today, Bach is known as one of the greatest composers in history. In fact, his music is so important, scientists at NASA made a golden record with Bach's music on it and put it on the Voyager spacecraft, which was launched deep into space. Could Bach ever have imagined that someday his music would be floating in space beyond the farthest planet in our solar system? Next time you feel like listening to something long ago and far away, put on some Bach and stare up at the stars. Have a great week.